Now I'm going to, I think we can draw this out long enough there, Ms. DeWeese. Retaining outside legal counsel when city attorney has conflict of interest. Who was it that was most interested in this? Brought this up?
Well, I asked that it, well, we voted to have it put on the agenda, so obviously the council felt that it was important. And Mr. Messer raised this issue in a memo to us that there are times when he may have a conflict of interest and we would have to have outside counsel on an issue. So, being as we may need to do that from time to time, I think that I don't know how would we go about doing it. Would we just put out an RFP, or just I'll ask the city attorney, since you're the one that brought up that you have a conflict of interest on occasion, that would leave us without an attorney. So how would you propose we go about doing this?
Well, Mr. Messer, you can answer that, but I have a feeling we're going to involve Mr. Reynolds in this discussion as much or more than the attorney themselves.
So I invite Mr. Reynolds to participate.
Mr. Reynolds.
Well, thank you, Mr. President, and Councilwoman Myers, to address your concerns. Like any other service that we would have, once we have budgetary funds in place to handle such a request, we would determine what specifically it is we're looking to have on the table. And in this case, it seems to be that there are some rare instances when Mr. Messer is put in a position of not being able to either adequately give counsel to either the mayor or the council because he serves two masters. Because of that, we would define that as a limited term or a limited contract for a legal service specifically at those instances. I would recommend that as part of that process we have in place a triggering event then that would make that particular contract come forward, and I would suggest that triggering event would be a vote of this body. That this body then believes, based upon some indication from Mr. Messer that there's a conflict, this body then makes a determination at that point that they wish to engage the services of their contracted legal counsel, and we move forward from there.
Okay, so I think I hear what you're saying is we could go ahead and contract with outside legal counsel, and in the event we needed outside legal counsel, I think it would just be a matter of the president of the council being authorized by the council to contact that person, but at least we would have somebody on retainer in the event that we need them. Does that sound about right?
Essentially, yes, ma'am.
Okay, so
Just one moment. Much like our storm debris removal program.
Absolutely, and you know, but again, I would caution the body that it is by vote of this body that becomes active, not individual council people, and you know.
I think we understand that that person would be acting in the capacity of giving legal advice to the city council as a whole and not individuals. But my question is, do we send out an RFP, or do we just come up with some names and decide that way, or?
Well, if I may, ma'am, there are multiple ways that we can look at this. One is either by a request for proposals or a request for qualifications. And then we can put those out on the street depending on one or the other which this body would request. I would suggest that what we do, if this body wants to move forward with this, is that we have the city purchasing authority come in and talk to you about the options that you have available, and then you can make an informed choice at that point.
Okay, I'll make a motion then that we have the city purchasing department attend the next committee of the whole to brief us on our options as to how to retain outside counsel.
Second.
Motion and a second. Dr.
I have no problem bringing the issue up, take a look at it, but if the intent is to hire somebody at this point, I believe that it's really important to see what issue is before us before we hire somebody, rather than hire somebody and then find out later their expertise is not in the area of the issue that's in front of us. So my concern is that we go ahead now and move to retain someone, and if that's our intent, then my only concern, like I said, is having somebody with the expertise in the area in the issues that are before us at that time, if I make any sense.
I kind of thought about that too, but yeah.
Okay. Dr. Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. President. My understanding from what Mr. Messer has said during meetings and other times is he basically has viewed that his responsibility is as counsel to the mayor as well as the city. And if there's ever a time when he felt that the council was asking something contrary to what the mayor would like, then he felt a conflict, and that's understandable. I keep hoping that we can come up with a creative solution other than seeking outside counsel. I recall back at some various union negotiation meetings in the previous council, we would have a situation where we would have Susan Wolf sitting with the negotiating team and Rusty Wells sitting with the council, and they sort of divided the house somewhat in that way. And I understand that Stephanie Tillery is in the attorney's office, and I would hope we could come up with a way where, maybe one or the other people in the attorney's office is sort of, there are times when the conflict is bigger, but there are other times when the various questions about the, appointing members to boards and commissions, that can be handled maybe in an hour conversation that would be helpful to all sides. And I just think it would be interesting for the attorney's office to consider a way to sort of say, all right, you're partially there to help the council see what the legal options for the council are. Not, don't put legal research into it, but, a conversation on an issue. I just would hope we could avoid running to outside counsel when we have lots of lawyers already employed by the city. Thank you.
I remember that as well, Dr. Pratt, and I think there was some sort of disclaimer that they ended up signing officially, or they at least came out publicly and made some sort of declaration, as to what each one of them's role is.
Right.
And then the Florida Bar, I believe, fines you guys by ethics to, not colluding, behind closed doors, is that there's going to be fair representation to the two different sides. And so look, I've got Stephanie's name written down here, Miss Tillery, I'm sorry, his name written down here because I was already thinking that myself. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Well, I would hope that could occur too, but obviously there may be times when that wouldn't occur, and I would hate for us to be in a position where all of a sudden we need legal counsel, but we have not retained a law firm or an attorney, and then we have to go searching. And I think that could work to our disadvantage. But the motion on the floor is to have purchasing come here and tell us how to do it if that's something we want to do. That's the motion.
Okay. Anyone else? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes.
Opposed.
Mr. Spencer opposed. Thank you.
Next item for discussion here is subject solicitation methods for outside legal services. And I don't know who exactly is going to lead that discussion. I have Mr. Reynolds.
Well, Mr. President, essentially the request was for staff to prepare an information item for council to determine what the options were in regards to outside legal services. Mr. Mayberger has handled that extremely well here. He's available here for questions. I can take questions. But essentially, what you see is a step-by-step in regards to what the options for you are.
Okay, if that's satisfactory, any discussion? This is just a information, for discussion. It's not an action item. Councilman Myers.
Well, I think that Mr. Messer has indicated there are times when he has a conflict of interest. And therefore, the council needs its own attorney or legal advisors. So I think what we need to do, we need to take some action, but and like the memo says, we can do it one of two ways. We can enter into a direct negotiation with a law firm that some of us may be familiar with. I don't have any firm in mind. Or we can do a RFQ. I wasn't going to suggest you, Mr. Messer. He's over there smiling. But I do think it's something we need to discuss and take action on, because during the times when he does have a conflict of interest, then we need an attorney. So I think we need a law firm on retainer or a lawyer.
Thank you, Mr. President. I agree that this has come up quite a few times, and we do need a structure for it. I believe at the last conversation, when this came up before, I also asked if the city attorney could put some thought into a way to create sort of the wall between himself and Mrs. Tillery or whomever is in that office, sort of like used to happen with the union negotiations, where one attorney sat in the audience and one sat up with us. And because I think that it goes beyond almost, oh, no, we have a issue that the council needs resolved. There are times when individual council members have legal questions, and there needs to be someone who feels that it is their responsibility to advise the council members as to, it might not have been something that has been voted on by the council, but just general advice, how do we interpret the chart? How should we interpret the charter? Would this be fit under the charter? And I have had conversations with Mr. Messer where he has had trouble differentiating between his job as the attorney for the mayor and his job as attorney for the council. And that's a challenge, but it goes beyond even an outside person. If there's a way to structure it so there's an inside person as well who feels compelled to advise the council on its role, that would be desirable. And I'm not saying to not also have this as a way, but I think that would be good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other discussion? Yes, Ms. Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just kind of wanted to put some bookends on this conversation, if you will, from an administrative point of view, and not necessarily the office of the mayor or anything else. There are times where Mr. Messer has a conflict, and certainly the council should have something in place to deal with those times. But as someone who sees the proclivity of legal expenses ever expanding with this organization, having an open-ended where one person can go in and talk to an attorney.
And I'll say that was meant in terms of somebody who's inside, who's already working for the city. That was my concern. I didn't want this to be an individual, but when something has come up and I've had questions, I can turn to Mr. Messer, but there's a question there.
And I think as long as the council as a whole would vote on those issues, and then authorize then their legal counsel to address them, then from an administrative standpoint, and again, this is just from the guy who watches the numbers, then I'm comfortable with that. But I just wanted to throw that out there.
I probably shouldn't weigh in on this, but just a few thoughts off the top of my head is I don't know, and I need clarification on how the charter speaks to staff for council. Does it address having an attorney? Beyond the practical aspect of whether council is assigned to council or not, I'm not arguing whether it's good or not. I mean, there's no question we need it. What I'm saying is I don't know legally under the charter, does it allow for that? Number two, even if we determine we do want an attorney, I don't know if the money's there to pay for an attorney. We don't have our own pot of money. We still depend on the mayor's office to sign the checks. We don't have a treasurer. Mr. Barker is the treasurer, but he's the mayor's treasurer, finance person, not ours. So I'm not speaking against the issue. I'm just saying there's things that we need to clarify as we go into it. Okay. Any other discussion before we move? Yes.
I guess I didn't state it as clearly as
Sure.
I meant to. I was hoping that Mr. Messer could weigh in on whether it's feasible to create
Sure.
some sort of firewall and have, Mrs. Tillery as our contact in this situation.
Exactly. And I don't know if you want to address this now or look into it, Mr. Messer.
He's sitting here. We don't have to talk to Mr. Reynolds to talk to
Oh, I
the
mean, to
city
Mr. Messer,
attorney.
I'm sorry, I got the people confused. I didn't turn my chair far. Mr. Messer.
I think that, thank you, Mr. President. I think there are some issues with setting up a firewall with an assistant city attorney. I'll give it some thought, but that, you get into situations where, it's my duty to supervise the assistant city attorney. And then if that assistant city attorney starts speaking to individual council members about issues, I just don't know if I'm comfortable with that. I mean, my office policy is that only I speak to the council members. So she's not authorized to talk to a council member about a legal problem. And my other policy is that I represent this entity. In other words, my office doesn't represent individuals. My office represents the body. So whatever 5 council members direct me to do, I do. Now, my door is always open. I mean, I've spoken to all the council members at one. So, at one point in time, I don't think it's an insurmountable problem to talk to me, but I don't know really that I could set up a firewall with the assistant. But I would encourage you, because I think there are council members who feel comfortable with our own attorney. Believe me, I support that 100%. But in the meantime, I think you're probably stuck with me.
Does that help, Council? Councilman Myers, I'm trying to count. Is this your second time?
One time?
Okay,
No.
Go ahead. I'm just trying to.
I'm keeping track, too.
That's
believe-
good.
trust
Help me, because I need all the
Yeah,
help.
I'm going to keep track.
Thanks.
I'd like to ask Mr. Messer to address the questions you asked. First, you asked, you weren't sure under the charter if council can contract for its own attorney. I believe, Mr. Messer, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you've taken the position that council can contract for its own attorney. I mean, if we can't, then why are we even having this discussion? In fact, Mr. Messer recommended that we seek outside legal counsel when he has a conflict of interest. So obviously, I think under the charter, there's no prohibition against the council contracting for any services we want. But certainly in the situation that Mr. Messer has put before us that he has a contract. We can't have a legislative body that doesn't have legal counsel. It just won't work. So I guess the question I'm asking Mr. Messer is, could he clarify for the council that yes or no, we cannot hire outside counsel?
And before I call on Mr. Messer, let me tell you the basis of my comments. And my comments aren't necessarily one that I think are good or bad. It's just basically what's driving me, my position. It's not a position I like or dislike. I'm not speaking that part. But the charter, to me, expressly says that the mayor hires and fires staff, period. And so, to me, that says the mayor then decides on who the folks are going to be. It doesn't say that the mayor will hire and fire staff except for A, B, and C. Now, if I can get over that, and again, I'm just trying to stay within the law, and that's where I'm, trying to stay within. And with that, Mr. Messer.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think when Councilwoman Myers and I talked about this, seems like ages ago, we were talking about a situation where the board, where the council used its own funds to essentially hire an independent contractor. I think that you could probably create a situation like that, and that person would not be a city employee and not hired by the mayor, if we had to. But for the new members, just some quick observations on disqualification. The only time I have been disqualified in a substantive matter is during the issue of the subpoenas, whether or not this council could, in essence, investigate the mayor. And without going into details, I think it's pretty clear that I can't set up on a 7th floor, 2 blocks, 2 offices from the mayor and talk to him about what council's doing to him and then come down here and, attempting to do to him. The other problems we have, really, we're in a very litigious atmosphere here. We currently have a lawsuit on appeal to the 1st District Court of Appeal, Councilwoman Canada Wynn, on the very issue you talked about. What's the authority of the mayor to regulate communication between council persons and his staff? So, obviously, I can't comment on that, and neither can anyone else because it's under litigation. We also have a lawsuit that's been filed by a former council person that, it's a 57-page complaint that sort of covers everything from A to Z. We have the veto, the mayor's travel, conflicts of interest. So my point when I get back to the firewall is that because of the litigious atmosphere we're in, and I'm not even counting the times I walk over to the state attorney's office on sunshine law violations, which have been 3 in 1 year. It's probably virtually impossible to isolate the other attorney in my office from what's going on. It's public knowledge, it's blog knowledge, it's newspaper knowledge, so it's just a difficult situation to be in. And so the disqualifications really arise from the facts of what goes on. In other words, I don't invite the disqualification. I have to deal with the facts as they're presented to me. But to get back to your original question, I still think it's possible to set up a situation, but it would have to involve council funds where the mayor doesn't hire the attorney.
Does that help, Councilwoman?
Yes, sir. Does it help you? You were the one that raised the question.
Well,
Well, and excuse me one more time, Mr. President. You're absolutely right, first of all. What I'm saying is I think that with some creative budgeting and advertising, we could probably carve out a very narrow exception to authorize I think it depends, and Mr. Barker's left, I think it depends on who's going to pay this person. I mean, if Mr. Barker's going to sign the check, then obviously, it's going to be the mayor's employee.
Yes, Councilman.
I guess just from what it sounds like, from what I'm hearing, is that there's no rule against us contracting with someone on the rare occasion that Mr. Messer feels like he has an obligation that he can't be on either side. So for the few times that happens, we can just use, it have to be council funds, and say we're going to use these funds to hire an attorney to represent us in this specific occasion, not just in general. And I guess that's kind of what I'm getting, and that seems pretty cut and dry. So I think that's, we definitely need to look into that. And I guess from my point is it would take a vote of the council to say, okay, let's hire this person to do this and spend our own money to do it.
Right. And not only that is we have to make sure we have money to be able to pay the person.
If there's no money there, we can't do it.
Exactly. So, Councilman.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Kind of, if we've identified, say, $30,000 in city council budget that's not spoken for, if there's an issue brought before the city council that a particular council person feels that we need legal representation that doesn't have a conflict, that with an attorney that doesn't have a conflict either perceived or real, it would take 5 votes, I believe, from this city council to say, okay, this issue is something that the majority of this council feels that needs to be pursued. There's been funds identified that are available to us, and then I guess we run that to ground to make sure of how. I don't think Mr. Barker's signing checks, but maybe he is. But at that point, with a majority vote, funds identified, and the being able to spend those funds, then we could pursue whatever legal matter it is. But right now, I can't think of any that's come before us here recently. But it's starting to get late. But thank you.
Okay. I believe if the council will indulge me, I was going to commend y'all for setting a world record for getting out here, but we've just exceeded that. So I believe that the clarification we were seeking is, are we able to do it? And if I understand Mr. Messer correctly, he's saying that we can. And I believe that what we need is, I think you put it very well, Councilman Johnson, we don't want a situation where somebody gets angry and they go out and get a lawyer, and then we're end up paying for it. It has to be a situation where 5 of us feel strongly enough about an issue that we can then go ahead and contract to get somebody. And then within that, we have to look into what the procedure would be for setting aside a certain amount of money for legal fees. And I think if we do all that, then we'll have everything set up, so if the case arises, then we're able to then take action. Does that help?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
now to get this into action, what do we need to do at this stage? I think we already have the attorney's opinion. And Mr. Reynolds, please feel to weigh in if you see anything that's going around. Who would we have to talk to about setting aside a proportion of our budget for legal fees if the need arises?
Mr. President, it is your budget. Part of me has the other issue that, frankly, we've been looking at internally in regards to funding for Mr. Messer when it's a council issue that generates legal fees.
Right.
And because we're when Mr. Messer says that we're in a litigious environment, that's an understatement. And it's clear that the members, that the individuals who wrote the charter and probably the public who passed it never foresaw this type of a situation. We'd like to try to find a solution. I think that certainly with a very limited contract for those rare occasions when Mr. Messer is unable to provide legal opinion to this body, then certainly, that's something that can be set aside within the bounds of the budget.
Okay. So if I understand it correctly, then we have the legal right to obtain an attorney if the group 5 or more feels necessary. We have the budget under our control to set aside the funds should it be needed. And hopefully this will be a big step toward what you're concerned. I'm sorry, Councilman Barry.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a question. I think I heard in there that you are considering charging the city council's budget for issues where Mr. Messer is employed due to council action. Is that correct?
We're trying to look at ways, we don't have an unlimited budget when it comes to legal fees.
Right.
And when it comes to litigation is not covered under Mr. Messer's original contract. Litigation is a separate matter. It's up and above the normal contract that we have with the city.
Right.
So at some point, if we continue to move forward with this litigation, we have to find a way to pay for it. And I think it's incumbent upon everyone to understand that litigation comes with a price. And we currently are getting ready to defend a federal suit that's been appealed from a summary judgment.
Mr. Reynolds, at the risk of being rude, I believe the topic that we're discussing is methods for obtaining outside legal services, and so.
Yes, sir. I was just responding to Councilman Baer's question, but we can talk about that
right.
at another
Okay.
point, Councilman, if you want.
And please be assured, I will be an equal opportunity offender as we go along.
Oh, no, absolutely.
Mr. Messer.
I'm all
And,
about it.
thank you, Council President. And I want to address my remarks to Councilman
Sir.
Bear. Just real quick, because I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I go to extraordinary lengths to try to create isolation on those issues that involve conflicts. For example, when a sitting or past council member sues the mayor, I contract that out to another attorney, because I think it's unrealistic for anyone to expect me to sit at this council meeting when we have antagonistic interest in a lawsuit. And I think part of the issue that Mr. Reynolds is trying to explain is that attorney then bills us at about $305 an hour for those lawsuits. I'm not billing that. That's the outside attorney, but I can't handle it. And so it just sort of snowballs. And that's just one of the consequences of litigation. Councilwoman Myers, you've done twice,
Third
haven't
time,
you?
but you ask a question, how do we get there? And I think that,
Well, before you speak, what we need to do is the indulgence of the body to allow you to speak the third time on the issues. Okay.
Move
All
to
in
allow,
favor? Okay.
move to allow
Second.
Councilwoman Myers to
Okay.
speak.
Second.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second right here.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right, proceed.
I just wanted to throw this out. Why don't we see how much we have in our budget for professional services? Since the issue is, would we be able to pay for it? Once we determine that, then we can have this discussion again.
Yes.
But I think that's the first thing we need to know.
I think
So,
that's an
and
excellent way.
remember, we have an council executive.
Yes.
So I think she could be tasked with getting that information
Excellent
for us.
Excellent suggestion.
You know, so maybe at the next committee of the whole, we could have that information. How much
Okay.
do we have for professional services, and how much is allocated already for professional services?
Excellent suggestion. Yeah. Let me say, I think we've done something very important tonight. It's something that needed to be done. It brought me under completing on record time, but I think it was something we needed to discuss. We have an opinion from the attorney that we're able to get outside legal representation should a need arise. Ms. Myers has given us a way how we could look into the money, Councilman Myers, and I believe that we're in good shape, and the situation arises, we now know how to proceed and what to do. So I commend you for bringing up a very important topic and getting us to get some resolution on it. Any other question, any other discussion on this? It's not an action item, but we've already taken action, so we'll move on unless there's any questions. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Council communications and new business. Yes, Ms. Myers.
I have some information I want to share with council. I need to give out this sheet of paper here. I'll just pass it down there, and then I'll take it over here, pass it out over here.
Oh, I've got it. Oh.
PC.
Okay, I guess everybody has a copy of this. I made an open records request on August the 23rd for information regarding how much the city has spent on legal fees for the past 2 years. I asked for the contracts with the lawyers or law firms providing legal services to the city. And the only thing that I've gotten thus far is this list of law firms or lawyers that we have paid money to for legal fees, and it totals $4.2 million. Now, that is a substantial amount of money in 2 years. Now, the problem is I have made 3 open record requests, the same request, for contracts for this work, so that I would know what we have contracted for these law firms or attorneys to do. To this day, I have not gotten one contract. So I revised the open records request, since the term contract seemed to be giving some people a problem, and I revised it to ask for, on November the 13th, I said, I am revising the request to eliminate the word contract and instead ask for any documents that evidence an agreement to provide legal consulting services or professional services from anyone who is an attorney to the City of Pensacola, its departments, divisions, and other city governmental entities. To this day, I have not gotten one record that evidences the city has any kind of an agreement with these law firms or individuals for legal services. Now, mind you, this has been going on 3 months ago, August the 23rd. I made this request, and this is all that I have gotten. This is pretty astounding. I know Mr. Messer has a contract. I know Mr. Asmar has a contract. I don't know who else has a contract. But I know that you just don't pick up the telephone and call a lawyer or a law firm and say, hey, we need you to represent us or provide legal services. You don't do that. You have to have a retainer. You have to have some type of an agreement. So then, when I couldn't get contracts because Mr. Barker said he didn't have contracts and I don't expect him to have contracts, he just has invoices. So then I told Mr. Barker, this information is fine, but I do need the contracts or the agreements. So Mr. Barker does not have the contracts. He doesn't keep contracts. He just pays the bill when it comes due. So I said, okay, well, let me see the invoices. Well, there are 500 plus invoices for all these services here. So then the city clerk sends me a letter and says that's going to be $500. Now, mind you, not only, I don't have any contracts to look at, but now I'm going to be charged to look at the invoices. and there are 500 of them. Now, let me tell you something. This is the people's business, $4.2 million. And I don't know what it's for. I'm asking council, as a body, to request this information. It's a violation of the law, as you all know, not to answer this open record request. It's a criminal violation to withhold information, but I get the feeling the city takes the position, so what? Now, I'm not going to drop this, and I have asked the clerk to send me the emails that she sent out to whoever she sent it to, asking them to respond to my open record request. But I would like council as a body to investigate this, to ask for the same information that I'm trying to obtain so that we will know what the taxpayers' money is spent on, $4.2 million. Is that too much to ask? So I would like to put this on the next committee of the whole. So I'm going to make a motion that we add this to the next committee of the whole, the issue of the contracts for these services here that's represented on this vendor payment history.
I'll second that.
I have a question here with this. Okay. My question, the first question is what has been the delay? Have you gotten any feedback as to what the delay is? Second, when there is, they told you it was $500, did they talk about whether or not the $500 was to pay for copier costs, labor costs, and because normally when you do a public records request, first of all, it is in the course of your business as a city council member that it should not be a fee. If it is not in the course of city council business, then normally there is some type of fee, and normally they will give you the fee rate of whatever the fee is, and the copies, and like if you have to make 100 copies, it's 15 cents per copy, or whatever the rules are, plus the labor costs or the wage costs that it would take if it took 2 or 3 hours on that. So did you get any type of information in reference to that?
They're charging me for labor. That's my understanding. I asked to inspect the invoices. Now, I've had to go that route because I have not gotten any contracts, retainers, or any kind of an agreement that would evidence what we paid them for. So the only way I can find that out is through actually looking at 500 or so invoices, which quite frankly, I don't want to do. I mean, I don't have the time. But if that's the only way, and I am doing it within the scope of my authority on the city council, because we are often asked to approve legal fees for this and that. So I think that, you know, that that's the situation. Unfortunately, I have to make open record requests because of the prohibition on speaking with staff members. But I just wanted to share this information, and I hope council is concerned enough to want to know what $4.2 million was spent on in the past 2 years.
Mr. President?
Yes.
The invoices will cover that, Councilwoman Myers. They'll specifically outline what the outlays were for.
But I have to pay for those. They're charging me for them. The contracts should not be that voluminous. And then I have to go through 500 invoices.
I'm not sure of any contracts that we have. I have not checked into it, frankly, but other than with Mr. Messer, and maybe Mr. Messer can help us out here, but when Mr. Messer calls other attorneys and asks for a legal opinion, since I've been here, I have not signed one contract dealing with legal services.
We have to have some type, it has to be a letter, maybe it's an email, but there has to be some understanding with these. Here's one law firm we paid $1.6 million to. I mean, it goes on and on. We have to have some kind of memorialization, even if it's Mr. Messer's notes or maybe Mr. Messer's emails. I don't know, but there has to be something besides invoices because, I mean, you know, for this $1.6 million, they could have submitted 100 invoices. I just want to know what they did. I mean, I don't need to look at the invoices. That's going to be very time consuming. I just want to know what we've retained them to do.
Let me get Councilman Bear, then we'll come back. Councilman Bear.
Thank you, Mr. President. I seconded this motion, and it's very clear in our charter where it says to inquire into the conduct of any municipal office, department, or agency or officer, and to investigate municipal affairs, and for that purpose may subpoena witnesses, administer oaths, and compel the production of books, papers, or other evidence. I think if we need something to do our jobs as legislators, we should be able to get it without having to pay a fee. And if it takes authorizing from the city council, if we have to vote on that, to send that to the administrator, to the mayor, then we may have to do that. But I hate the idea of having to request and pay fees for public records that I should have access to as a council member. That's why I was elected, is to be able to be informed about what's going on in our government. And I think that, you know, if we can't get individually, we need to authorize the council and have a vote to do that. Yes, sir.
And if I may, Mr. President, specifically...
Mr. Messer was next, and then I'll get you right after.
Thank you, Mr. President. To try to illuminate some of this so we have a little balance in the discussion, just off the top of my head, law firms like Allen, Norton and Blue, Emmanuel Shepard, Beggs and Lane, the city has been operating probably under the same fee agreement for, I'm guessing, 25 or 30 years. So whenever those law firms and law firms similar to those law firms are called upon to render an opinion, they just do it at a rate that they haven't raised probably in the last 2 decades. I think our personal injury law firm, I forget the name of it now, has billed us $125 an hour for the last 25 years. So that's a large part of that are just contracts that go back in history. The other thing we need to understand is that enterprise funds contract with attorneys on their own. For example, the airport has many problems, not many problems, the airport has several problems, among which is a minimum standards issue that they contracted with a law firm in Philadelphia for. That never comes through the city attorney's office and probably not through administration either. But they're self-sustaining and they hire their own attorneys and they pay the bills and we move on down the road. So in terms of what you find on the invoice will show what that attorney did, and that can be correlated to a certain event. But I don't think you're going to find a contract for every single event. I think they're like umbrella contracts, and for employment we call Allen, Norton and Blue. For construction we call Beggs and Lane. For real estate, we probably call Emmanuel Shepard. They simply bill us based on the client's desire, whether that be a council desire, as exemplified by 5 votes, or mayoral interest. So hopefully that does a little bit to help us.
I'm sorry, Ms. Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to point out to council, and it's one thing, frankly, that I've been struggling with, is that according to the council's own policies, there's no exception for council members when it comes to charging for public records requests. Now, I would encourage you to incorporate such if 5 members of this body determine that's what you want to do, then I certainly don't have a problem with that. Or the alternative is each time there is a question that comes up, this body can vote on to waive the fee. But it's your policies that we're talking about, and absent some exception to that, you can see the position it puts us in.
If I could ask Mr. Reynolds a question, how many open record requests would you say there have been within the last year, Mr. Reynolds?
That's an excellent question, Mr. President. I can tell you that, and I don't want to exaggerate, but I probably spend 3 hours a week on opens records requests. We get on an average 5, 6. 4 of those a week are probably from council.
So it would be
It
safe
is
to
truly
say-
unlike anything I've seen in my past.
So it would be safe to say that you're getting an average of 4 per week from council members?
I would say that that would be a safe number.
Okay. I believe Councilman.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I want to address that because I hear Councilwoman Myers fighting. She can't get this information. And I pulled up the question I sent to Mr. Reynolds during our budget, and I had pages of questions, which the staff freely answered, including attachment G, which was anticipated legal costs, with notations of which attorneys are doing it. It doesn't have the dollars. This was anticipated. It was a budgetary question. And I would encourage Councilwoman Myers and other council members, just ask them, because the open records, I hate when we have to come in and go through and it's like some random word. And it's such a broad brush, and it's a lot of work. But staff is responsive. They will try and answer your questions. I do know that before I got on council, I met with Mr. Barker, and the port was always a question, and people are always saying, oh, the port's losing money. And I said, Mr. Barker, is the port losing money? And he said, no, the port's not losing money. So then I went to actually David Bailey. I met with him, and I said, okay, David, you know how this works. Is the port losing money? He's like, well, Mr. Barker will answer the question you asked, but you have to make sure you ask the right question. So I've known that for a while. But if you ask the question, you do get an answer. And I think that this struggle of public records requests is too heavy-handed, and I find that I get good answers when I ask the questions. And so I would encourage everyone on council, just ask, and they will be as responsive as possible. You look through this list, and I'm seeing one that the Harrison, Sale, McCloy, and Jackson. Just for the record, that was the CRA attorney, and that was the overly disputed, did I have the right to sign a contract or execute a contract sheet of paper. That's what that was. I could pull it up for you from the Fortis system, except this doesn't do that. But I think that those questions can be answered, and I think that the staff is responsive when I've asked questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilwoman. Yes, Councilman.
I just wonder if we have the staff that the city council can assign this project for somebody to go back and research everything and get the information and then give it to us, rather than us trying to get pieces. And
You have an excellent question. I think part of it, that we're in the situation we're in is that we went without staff for, was it 2 years? And so it was difficult because there was no one to turn around and say, could you find out? Because we didn't have Dr. Cox on board until just recently. But she is now the person that we can turn to and say, would you mind going down and finding out these facts from legal for us, and so on. Now, whether she's successful or not is different. But you've raised a very, very important issue. We did not have staff. For whatever reasons.
if we all voted tonight for somebody to do it, could we get that done?
Right, and one reason that the meetings in the past have been long is in the old form, we had a city manager that would brief us prior to the meeting. So we went in the meeting, we knew what was going on. We're walking into a meeting now, and somebody throws something on the table. And we're sitting there trying to decide very, very serious issues on the spur of the moment, which to me is not the very best way of approaching. I think what we need to do is put the issue out, give it time to then go through committee, take a look at it, study it, and then vote. But that's just my opinion. But you asked a good question. Yes, Councilman.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Y'all keep count now.
But I hate to. I appreciate Councilman Wingate, but I hate to task Dr. Cox. I think she's been extremely busy to go through these 500 pages or so. If we're going to do something like that, I'd at least like to try to take a stab at maybe the top 5 or something, or maybe if some, but to say, hey, all these, go research it, get all the contracts. I mean, this looks like this could be a lot of work. And, if we've got one for 1.6 million, we've got some for 3.25, we've got some others for 243, et cetera. Maybe the top 5, if we could just start there and see kind of where we're at, but just hand this sheet to Dr. Cox and say, hey, get contracts for all, I don't even know how many there are here, 40? I mean, I think that's just a lot of work. And, but that's my thought. I mean, I'm looking at some that we paid for, and I'm just wondering if we paid them to do a public records request on me. If a certain, blogger in town wanted my, text messages, if the city paid them to represent them to ask for my text, I mean, anyhow, that's just my thoughts, just to pick a few of them, and if we're going to go that route and look at contracts, maybe just pick the top 5. Thank you.
Okay. Councilwoman. Clarification, what's this time period? I was out of the room. So this covers
2 years.
Thank you.
Sorry.
The two issues here is how, for me, is one, how council members are going to be treated in reference to public records requests, and I think that we need to bring that back up under our policies and procedures and review so that we'll understand that. The next thing is I just find it impossible to believe that when you got this list, even at the city, even our administrator, it could not have been categorized into whether or not they were bonding attorneys, whether or not they were contract attorneys. I mean, something that made a little bit of sense, not necessarily having to go through 500 invoices to determine this, because if the same attorney is sending invoices and the same attorney works for the airport, then we know that it's airport related, and we can move on, and this is what it's for. So I just find it hard to believe that there is no classification at all in reference to what entity, whether it's the airport, whether it's the port, whether we paid something dealing with the CMPA board, whether or not we paid something. I mean, there has to be some type of classification here, and maybe getting that classification and having that available on the next for her, and then, because it is important.
And if I may address that, Mr. President?
Mr. Messer had asked unless he would like to yield the floor.
Oh, I'm not going to yield the floor to Mr. Reynolds, Mr. President. And of course, at the risk of being the pincushion for my profession, the other thing I just want to make sure everybody understands for balance purposes, and believe me, I think that every penny of the taxpayers' money needs to be accounted for, and that's why we have invoices. For example, when I bill the city, the invoice goes to Mr. Reynolds, and he looks at it, and it goes down to Mr. Barker, and he looks at it, and I think that, we need to have checks and balances like that. But something we have to try and get over is, look, we're not getting in and out of court for less than $100,000 in a serious case. When you're doing construction law, you're looking at $200,000 before I raise an eyebrow. And we get to $300,000, well, maybe somebody has to sit down and talk. But I mean, we're sitting here, and hopefully we're not thinking that you're going to do litigation for $20,000 or $30,000 or $40,000. And to sort of illustrate the point, we have the CMPA who's involved in federal court litigation looking at an attorney's fee bill for $450,000. So, the question is, do you want to be litigious or do you want to try and resolve these things? But when you're looking at $100,000, $150,000, $200,000 for litigation, you're not really raising my eyebrow. I mean, that's a normal fee as far as I'm concerned for what's done.
Mr. Reynolds, I have a dilemma. Both of you all put your hands up at the same time.
I'm a council member, so.
Yes, okay.
I want to call the question on the motion.
Okay.
I want to call the question on the motion.
Okay, the question is.
What's the motion?
Your motion.
I can't remember. Madam Clerk, did you write down my motion? I can't hear you. Yes.
Okay. And Ms. Reynolds, I'm not calling on you because I believe this is a non-debatable motion here. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, I think, okay.
I'm calling the question. Okay, now,
Oh, sorry.
any motions on?
I'm with you on
Okay.
calling the question.
All right. All right, so the question is unanimous. Okay, now we're voting on the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay, 3 opposed. Okay. 4 opposed.
No, no, I just had a new item if it was next.
All right, go
It
ahead.
passed, is that correct, 5-3? Or
I'm sorry.
what was the vote?
The vote was,
5-3?
I believe it was,
She wasn't in the room.
Okay,
5.
thank you.
Okay, Vice President.
She can vote first.
Okay. I would like for the council to consider having a council policy and procedures review. At some point, we are new, and there are some things in our policies and procedures that we could address that could make things better for us. Like the idea of, and I've done some research here, about this awkwardness of the council not having staff, now, we are the budgetary people. We are the legislative body. We approve budgets. So the budget and the money is just not the mayor's money. It is also the city council's money. So, for example, we don't have a staff. The charter doesn't say, but we have ordinances. We have power to make sure that we have the staff we need to do our job, and we just need to do it through an ordinance. So we as a council need to get together to see what we want to do to make sure that we have adequate staff. There are some other things too, like, for example, that the charter doesn't talk about, like Ms. Cox. Who is her boss? Who does she report to? Does she answer to each 9 of us? How should we disseminate information to her? How does that work? We need to talk about it. And how does that work? So as you go through the policies and procedures, I think we could clean up a lot of things if we take a time out to go back and revisit some of those things. We can insert things in there that would help us. Like, I would like, and of course some of you, I would like to get rid of 2 committee of the whole meetings. This is a council meeting. Then we go and have the same council meeting on Thursday. In the last council, 2 years ago, they abolished the committee system. But is it something that's viable now, after 2 years? Is it something that would make our job a little bit easier? So I think before we go down this road of going through business as usual, we take the time out to go and look at our policies and procedures. All of us send that information to our executive so that she can put it together and put it in some form of concerns so that we'll be able to actually address it before we spend 3 or 4 months or 6 months down the road and we still come to some of these stumbling blocks that we need to go ahead and deal with it. So some of the impressions of the things that we cannot do is just not true, because other cities have done them out of the same pot of money. That's the public dollar, the tax dollar, the franchise fees. And the city council has a staff. You have an office. I was talking to someone Saturday, and the first thing they told me, they said, well, Jewel, how do you find a city council member? I said, you don't if you go to City Hall. Okay, you don't. We need an office of the city council. We need to act as a legislative body, as an important part of the process to create the balance with our executive branch and our legislative duties and help define who we are. And I would like to make a motion that we have a review of our policies and procedures within the next 30 days.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, discussion. Yes, Councilwoman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do very much support the motion, and ditto to what you just said. I do think we need to have a discussion about our policies and procedures. I would like to see us have a discussion about returning to the committee of the whole, the committee system. So in the next 30 days may be a little difficult because of the holidays, but I could see maybe in the next 45 days or 60 days because we have so many holidays coming up. So I would like to offer a friendly amendment to the motion, and that it be 60 days, and that Ms. Cox be tasked with organizing and facilitating that meeting in the next 60 days.
May I have a second to the friendly amendment?
Did you accept it?
Yes, accept it.
All right, any more discussion? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President. And so I won't add any time to our meeting. I'll just share this for the discussion, and you have it in front of you. It's a description of what a recommendation for the committee system would be, and I just hope we could consider that during this review. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. Okay, any other discussion? Okay. Thank you, Vice President. Excellent.
We got to vote.
Okay, any other discussion? Did you have?
No, I was going
All right.
to vote.
No, just make sure when you do the committee, looking at the committees, they don't have to be like they were in the past. They don't have to have the same names or anything. So make sure you include some of those issues and concerns over the last 2 years.
Okay. And I, before we call for the vote and ask for public input, I want to remind committee, council also, if you think that it's long doing what we're doing now, if you ask the committee system to it, you're talking about adding a meeting to approve what the committee did. As we're doing it now, we all hear the discussion, and we all say yes or no. So I'm not saying yes or no. All I'm saying is consider the fact that you want to have another meeting on top of the meeting. With that, is there any input from the public before we call for Ms. Dubuisson? Yeah, I'll get you. I'm sorry. Would it be all right if she...
I think this is an
Excuse me,
excellent...
Ms. Dubuisson, there were two hands here that I
I'd be
did
glad
not
to wait.
see. Okay.
Yeah, I've been hearing this about bringing back the committee system, and I did serve under the old system when we had the committee system, and I have not heard a compelling reason yet to go back to that. I'll be honest with you, I just have not heard a compelling reason to go back with that. Everything that's on our agenda today.
Councilman Johnson.
Yeah, well, okay.
I agree. I agree with what you're saying. But I think it would be more appropriate to have that discussion once we have it on the table.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Bear.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I was just going to say briefly that I'm not recommending through my structure that we go back to
Right.
exactly what it
Again,
used to
as
be.
I told Councilman
But you
Johnson-
spoke about this, saying that you
No,
extend the length of the meeting.
No, what
but-
I'm saying is please bring this up
Okay.
when we discuss it, and I encourage you very strongly to do so. Okay. Yes, Ms. Dubuisson, I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. And I, as a public who attends your meetings regularly, would encourage you to support this motion, because there is a lot of information that is not shared with all members equally because of the lack of time. Some people have hours that they spend with staff. Some people have prior knowledge, but they don't bother sharing it in the open forum because you're always pressed for time. And I do believe that what you're talking about doing and restructuring and reviewing the charter so that you have all of the answers and all the resources you need is the number one thing that you as a legislative body need to do, because you make the decisions for us. So please make it to where it works for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, is there any other business before us? There was somebody that had mentioned earlier. Yes, okay. All right.
No, I was just saying we need to vote.
I'm sorry.
No.
Councilman, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just saying we need to vote on that.
I'm sorry.
We need to vote on
Yes,
that motion.
right. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Okay, passes unanimously.